Welcome, travelers of the internet, to Bright Home Recording. This is your host, Master Barkle, and we're playing Tanuki Sunset. It's a little game. I think it's meant for people with some ADHD. And it's... I don't know how to explain it, but I've seen it a few times on YouTube. I'm sure everyone's probably seen one of them at some point in time. Most times they're like Minecraft or that... Oh, I can't think of the game's name, but it's often voiced over, which is what I'm doing now. You may feel like I'm a bit out of sync with the video game. That's because I am. Like I said, it's meant for those with some, ADHD. What does ADHD stand for? I'm not sure. Some guy once told me, it stands for Attention Dissociation Hate Donuts. But I feel as though he got distracted by the delectable baker's goods within my house. This game is quite a cute game. I don't know if it's really worth the price though. It's full price at $15. Like, I got the game on sale, which I think for that I quite enjoy it. I think it's well worth it. And sometimes it's just, you need a bit of relaxation with some, I'm not sure if this is quite lo-fi. These beats. And so, how to commentate over all this, I'm just gonna rant to you about modern world problems. It's not gonna involve politics or anything, more just, I guess people being unreasonable, greedy corporations, stuff like that. But while we're at it, just watch the show and relax. Maybe enjoy the music a little bit. First, let's talk about some of the misconceptions of AI art. AI is a tool, not this sort of entity that just makes its own stuff, that just keeps on growing and growing. Like, its database grows and grows, and you can argue that, maybe it is making up its own stuff, but overall it's a tool, same as a camera is a tool, same as a paintbrush is a tool. I don't necessarily believe that you should blame AI art for creating certain photos that may be representative of someone else's artwork, because most likely somebody had fed it images of this person's artwork or that person's artwork and told it to replicate that. And the AI art, being legally, I'm not saying necessarily morally justified, legally justified, would create its own original, and I have air quotes going on right now, image of that person's artwork. Yes, that looks like copy and paste, but really, it should be the individual blamed for that, because they fed it these very specific images and told it, I want this. Whereas if you give AI art more vague things, say, a craggy landscape with a purple sky and borealis, you can get much more vague landscape photos for the pieces of art that people want to make. I don't know if it's necessarily the act of art that people want to achieve. I feel like it's more the act of creation that people enjoy seeing and watching. People enjoy watching those satisfying videos of, leaf blowers happening and all that kind of stuff, right? It's not necessarily the act of the leaves blowing around themselves. It's the act of that, being clean, nice look to it, right? It's the end product that kind of satisfies people, right? For example, when, I build houses, I don't build every single building that there possibly is, but I can still appreciate the architecture and artwork that people put within their homes. They say they want this kind of a pillar, that, all kinds of fancy stuff like that. I may have not have been the one to build it, but I can still appreciate it for its creation. And the same way can apply to AI art. It's kind of like getting a head start. Instead of starting from a blank canvas, you can now, you know, get this detail or that detail, get some inspiration, say, okay, I got this kind of vague image in my mind, I want this, I want that. Now okay, all right, that's great. I like that. Now let's move it up a step or two. All right, let's add this, let's add that. And then eventually you take it into, Photoshop or maybe Microsoft Paint, and you add some of your own details to it, and this and that. And you create art, right? It's the act of creation, because you still very much have to put a lot of input into it. AI art can't just work all by itself and get you something very perfect, right? Because there's going to be some details here and there that's going to be a little bit off, or this off. So I don't know if you can really claim it to be your own work. Another big fear people often have is, will AI art replace me as an artist, or this or that? And the truth of that answer is, I don't know, or that is answers that only the future will hold. But I can tell you, we do have some historical precedent with the camera. A lot of artists, when the camera were first rolling out, we're like, oh my goodness, that can just take picture perfect this, picture perfect that, and now I'm going to be out of a job, I'm going to be out of this, all that whatnot. And the truth of the matter is, it didn't. It instead created a new art, right? There was still art done by paintbrush or pencil or this, that, but now we have photography as an art style where, people love traveling the world and taking these very beautiful sunset photos, or, landscapes from within our own world that can be quite otherworldly, unnatural to us, maybe, unless you live in those areas and have seen such things. It's become its own art style, and I think AI art has that same potential. Now, once again, the individual who may be generating AI art may be going off of very specific reference photos, and then they could add elements of fantasy to it, or add this, maybe add Yggdrasil to that rock here or something, make some things very fantastic. Maybe there's this rock here that you instead want to be a very colorful flower bush. You can do that with AI art and really wackify the landscapes that people have given to the internet for free use. If it's someone else's artwork that they wish to be paid for, I feel like there could be royalties exchanged. Now, regarding some more serious topics, such as that of AI pornography, is it morally, or is it okay in any way, shape, or form? That, I think, is more up to individuals once again. If somebody has given their permission for the use of their likeness in AI, then I think it can be okay. AI pornography specifically, then I feel like it could be okay. Unless, it age requirements and stuff like that, and individual AI generation companies should also have their own morals put into it. If they don't wish for that kind of content being put on their platforms or come from their platforms, I 100% agree with them and say, yeah, you shouldn't be able to just make it freely on their platform. But AI art it's Pandora's box has been opened, and computer parts and technology is becoming more and more vastly available to all kinds of creeps on the internet. And once again, I don't believe AI itself should be held responsible. I believe the individual should be held responsible. because let's compare it to a camera. If a camera is used to film some pornographic acts of a child, I don't believe we should scream and yell at the camera. I believe we should scream and yell at the individual who is filming that, who is, anyone who's involved in that, because that is some seriously fucked up shit, right? Now let's talk specifically about AI companies such as ChatGPT and others like them, right? I am no tech expert by any means, but I do genuinely feel like they could possibly put filters into their generation tools to kind of prevent this or prevent that, and prevent people from doing horrible things. But at that same point, with technology being so readily available to just about any schmuck on the streets, I honestly feel like it is possible for people to make their own AI tools and use them for devious actions. And once again, we can confiscate their equipment in those terms, right? If they were used like this or that, same with like pedophiles, if they acquired this access through the internet or this, they get their stuff taken away, as I feel they should, because we need to disable them from accessing that kind of stuff. And AI companies should be somewhat held to same accountability in terms of, this was made using your platform, you need to put filters on it or this or that. Maybe they can't. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what we need to put resources into instead of trying to censor AI companies. Maybe we should try to work on improving. Now, as far as corporations using AI to replace some people, I feel quite strongly against that, because a lot of big corporations make so much money that they can just hire the artists and not have to go through all the AI stuff, because if they get rid of those artists, I'm pretty sure most corporate executive suits have no idea how AI actually works, and they're going to just put out some absolute garbage. So instead, they're going to need to actually, get other artists who are willing to use AI art and replace the old artists with these new artists who, are more than willing to use AI art to create some, possibly wonderful things. If they are not as professional, they may decide to just, pump out hot garbage. Once again, it could be in terms of like voice acting and art here and stuff like that. I feel like corporations 100% will try to, but I don't believe they should, morally and legally. I feel like they shouldn't either, because they got the money to pay for an actor or this or that. Now, in terms of the individual, using a AI generator, I think it can be okay, and an okay way to save some money here and there. Let's say you're a writer, right? But not an artist. You have just a bit of a different skill set, and you got about $1,000 worth to invest into this book you're creating, and now you need a cover picture for it, but you don't really have the artistic talent for it. You just have the writing skills that fills the pages within the book. So you contract an artist to make some cover art for you. Well, the front cover will cost you pretty much close to $1,000, and if you want that on the back as well, that'll be some more dollars. You could just spend it on the front of the cover, and then on the back cover you can use AI art to sort of generate a nice little background that was used on the front around to the back. I believe Shadiversity on YouTube. He had a really good example of he could have done that with his book, Shadow of the Conqueror, uh, where he had to cut some corners here and there on terms of money because he doesn't have millions and millions of dollars like big corporate suits. Now, of course, I am just an internet idiot. I do have a very limited scope of research and knowledge on the topics. I myself am not in the exact same situation as a lot of people who are in these situations, who are complaining that it could be horrible, it could be this, fear-mongering, I would call it. So I am open to discussion, though if you just completely dismiss it, it's not ever going to be a discussion. It's only going to be, anger responding to what I'm trying to be is reasonable and willing to have a discussion and argument over it. And I'm willing to hear out people. And yes, there will be some argument of, I feel this way, I feel that way, and that's perfectly fine and acceptable. You can still do what you wish to do. A lot of people will still put their pencils to paper and not use AI art. That's perfectly fine. But don't attack those who do choose to use AI art. It is simply another tool. Same as you wouldn't want to attack anybody who is using cameras as opposed to drawing out the art themselves. But that could also be up to subjective opinion and perhaps Twitter angry mobs to come storming at my doors. The goal of an argument should be to bring one side to the other, or to convince others who may be watching to join your side or the other side. And I've always somewhat agreed, somewhat disagreed with that whole concept, because I feel like there are many more boundaries crossed. It's not so simple and white and black as good versus evil, right? I always feel like there's middle grounds everyone can lead on some subjects. Some are, there is 100% a boundary here, but that doesn't mean you should respond in anger in any of your arguments. I believe reason should always be applied first and foremost, knowledge, logic, all of that, because insulting another person, clowning on them, as some would say, anything like that often just leads to a destructive argument where it just devolves into anger, one yelling at the other, I'm right, you're wrong, all kinds of stuff like that. And it never really, gets better, is the best way I'm trying to put. No one wins in those kinds of situations. You always got to think about the others who may be watching this, or maybe, vilifying them also kind of just makes them want to stand their ground and justify themselves. It as far as my experience goes, I'm not a psychologist by any means, but from what I can tell, it usually just devolves into a bit of chaos, I guess, and nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets resolved, and neither side's willing to compromise with the other. And on some arguments, sometimes you don't need to compromise. Or maybe there's somebody arguing. I've already brought this analogy up several times now. Questions are going to be raised about me, I'm sure. But pedophiles, are they okay in society? I 110% believe no, they are not acceptable in society. And, I might devolve into anger if you decide to argue against that or something. But on other arguments, one I should point out is Professor Dave. Now, regarding Professor Dave, I do believe in much of his work. I do appreciate the infotainment and the explaining things in the simplest way possible to reach as massive an audience as possible and make it as easy to understand as possible. I 110% agree with all of that. What I'm talking more specifically is his flat earth debunks. I'm not a flat earther. I believe in the science of all, what Professor Dave explains. What I don't appreciate is him sort of vilifying the flat earthers, because once again, that just makes them want to stand their ground and argue against you. No, you're wrong. This, that, yada, whatnot, right? And he kind of does feed into it, especially when it comes to that debate you had with, who was it, that one? I think it was like David Weiss. I can't remember how to pronounce his name at the moment, but he was having that debunk, and I understand that David is a scammer who, is luring vulnerable people. But when you go and attack somebody's, possible idol like that, they feel they got to defend him. So attacking him didn't really solve the issue. It just sort of made people stand their ground even harder. And while, yes, the arguments you made possibly have won over some flat earthers, so maybe it was a success, the way you went about arguing, I feel like you could have done a little bit better at keeping cool and sticking to just the facts and explaining things in a simpler way that even simpler people can understand it. And you do that in your videos, which I 110% agree with. Another good way to argue just without all the emotions in it can be simply quantity, showing them this work, that work, this, that, and this, and this, and that, and that. And eventually, evidence just piles on higher and higher and higher. And once again, they may still decide to stand their ground and say, no, you're wrong. But provided you keep cool, sometimes you can just win more people over, because more and more things will start clicking and making sense. And if you can, connect the dots between all of these pieces of evidence and just the quantity of it, it could win more people over. Perhaps winning them over would be to appeal to that side of their, fantasy, where you can kind of give them these kind of outlandish things that exist within our world and is proven by science. For example, like deep under the ocean, there's some really horrifying looking beasts that, we had seen them, 100, 200 years ago. We'd be like, oh my goodness, those are aliens or something like that, appeal to that side of fantasy and then prove it with science and, show that these are the same people who have proven this, who have also proven these theories that you say are false and wrong. And, perhaps that wins them over, because I know that in my own writing when I'm, playing Dungeons and Dragons, being a dungeon master, I like to look at real world science and add a bit of fantasy flair to it for my own fantasy worlds. Because there's some really cool looking, fantastical, mythical, as well as, strange sights and things you can find in our world, in caves and here and there, because not everyone gets exposed to those environments. Not everyone gets to see all that stuff because they don't live within those fields of research and work or something like that, or maybe they don't care to watch documentaries anymore regarding science and stuff like that. They're too busy with, Netflix, so maybe you got to appeal to them like that. Perhaps you could also look to history to further your points, or we've had very different perspectives on things, both with our modern view on things as well as looking at it through a different lens where we put ourselves more in the shoes of historical people and looking at all these strange new things. Like, things can be different. Now, regarding flat Earth, medieval people still believe the world is round, right? Not flat, whereas we, with our modern perspective, believe that. But we have history that can tell us, no, most people would be like, I don't know, go ask a bloody scientist, right? And the scientists would say, yes, the world is round, because they're the experts in their fields, right? Perhaps starting simpler for them and then advancing to a more complex subject and then a more complex thing and more complex, and kind of baby stepping them through your argument can help them to understand, because a lot of people don't understand arguments and they'll just stand their side because this is what they know to believe. Whereas if you kind of baby step them and lead them through it, that they feel like you're a friend there that's there to guide them and show them the way of the world and all that whatnot. And I feel like it leads to a more successful and productive argument. Now, same as my points go, this isn't supposed to be a diss on Professor Dave Explains, because he knows what he knows. Maybe arguments isn't something he knows particularly. That doesn't mean he can't learn now and, maybe take up on some of these tips and tricks, and maybe even he does know better how to argue, and maybe he wants to argue with me here, a productive argument, of course. I'm not going to just respond to anger. But if he wishes to have discussion, I'd be more than willing to have discussion regarding arguing successfully, not necessarily flat earth or any of that, because I am on his side regarding that. Oh, what a video this is going to be editing-wise. This is going to be talking multiple points where, number one, do you like the looks of this game or not? And do you want it? Figure that out for yourself. Me, on the other hand, I had to make some sort of content out of it, and you know what? I needed to ramble. And I feel if talk is cheap, then being silent is expensive. And many people, it seems, can't afford to buy into it. This is Master Markle from Bryhelm Recording, signing off.